What's up, Bulldogs? All right, today we're going to talk about the 3 levels of freedom. This is something I've talked about in some older videos in the past, but I wanted to revisit this topic because I think it's such an important topic, and a lot of people don't really understand freedom and how to gain freedom in their life. I'll do another video where I talk about what freedom is, but like what true freedom is and what blocks you from having freedom. But I want to talk about, in this video, the levels of freedom as I've defined them that influence how you behave. And this is something that comes up a lot when I was helping guys with dating and talking to women, because a lot of guys will have social anxiety. So if you have social anxiety and you're struggling with that, what I'm going to talk about in this video might help you a lot and to understand kind of what the progression is and how you can go up these levels of freedom. So the first level of freedom that I'll define is the level of freedom where you're acting out of inhibition. Okay, so now a lot of people actually try to break through this level of freedom using alcohol or other drugs in order to decrease their inhibitions so that they can go out and, let's say, talk to someone, or they can be less nervous in a social setting. But doing that actually retards your development in this area and makes it so that you don't actually reach level 2. But level 1 looks like the level of freedom where you can't do things because you're afraid of social consequences, or you're embarrassed or shy, right? So for example, if you wanted to go and talk to a girl that you saw that was attractive, most people would not be able to get past level 1. They would not be able to do it. They would be stuck at level 1 where they would be inhibited by that, and they would feel like, oh, I can't do this. I can't go and talk to this girl. I'm too afraid. What if she says no? That they would run all of these cycles in their brain that would tell them to not do this thing, and they just wouldn't be able to do it. No matter what they tried to tell themselves, they just can't do that. So that's level 1. That's the most restrictive level of freedom, and that's where most people are. And these levels of freedom apply in different areas of your life, right? So you have to sort of develop them depending on what the context is. Just kind of like confidence. Like I talked about, that confidence is contextual. There's a similar thing with freedom, in the sense that you can have contextual freedoms in certain areas and levels that you can grow, and you can have a complete freedom in your life, which comes from developing freedom in various areas, and then expanding that to the self itself, right, where you allow yourself to be even more free, where you're acting not out of inhibition. Okay, so the second level of freedom is one where you are basically acting with compulsion. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So let's say that you break out of the first level of freedom, right? The first level of freedom, the reason why you're not doing things, or you're doing things, is because you have inhibitions about it, right? So let's say, again, you see an attractive woman that you want to approach. You don't do it. You make all kinds of rational justifications in your head as to why, she seems busy right now. Now's not a good time. I got to get home, whatever it is, right? You're kind of lying to yourself in that case, right? That's the first level of freedom. The second level of freedom, you have broken through that, and you've said, no, I'm going to make myself do this, right? And so you go and you just force yourself to go and talk to the girl, let's say. But now you're sort of in this mode where what you're doing is you're doing it all the time, right? You see a girl, now you feel like you have to talk to her, right? Otherwise you're a coward, or otherwise you're going to fall back to that first level of freedom. So you're doing things out of compulsion, right? It's not because you want to do them, but it's out of compulsion, right? The ultimate freedom, again, kind of skipping to the third level, is where you're doing things not out of inhibition or compulsion, right? You're not afraid to do something, but you don't feel compelled to do it, right? And the reason why neither of these things is free is because in one case, you're not free to do the thing you want, and in another case, you're not free to not do the thing, right? You feel compulsion to do or to prove yourself in some way, right? So that's what level 2 is. Level 2 is where you've overcome level 1, but now you don't really know how you feel about a thing. You just feel like you have to do a thing in order to prove to yourself, to prove to everyone else that you can do the thing, right? So you start doing things out of compulsion because you don't want to be the person that you were when you're level 1. All right. Now, a lot of guys can get into this phase and they get stuck in this phase. Now, this is a good place to be, right? If you're doing things out of compulsion, because you're able to accomplish more in your life, right? But it can be destructive because then you're not really truly making a decision, right? So the best way I could kind of give you this kind of an understanding of this would be that I've coached a lot of guys, and many times I would talk to a guy that, I'm like, okay, well, go and talk to this girl. And then he would say, well, I could do it if I wanted to. I just don't want to right now. I just don't feel like it right now. Okay. And that's obviously an excuse in that case, but it could also be the truth, right? Someone else who was operating at the third level of freedom, that could be their truth. They could really do it if they wanted to, but they just don't want to right now. And that's the true freedom, right? When normally when a guy's telling me that, it's a lie. It's a justification that he's making up in his head. But it could also be true if you reach level 3. So what is level 3? Level 3 is where you're not doing things out of inhibition and you're not doing things out of compulsion. You're doing them literally because you want to do them, and that's the only reason why, right? So again, if we use the example of let's say talking to a girl that you found attractive, in that case, you would only do it if you truly wanted to do it, right? Let's say that you saw a girl and you wanted to go and talk to her, you would go and talk to her, right? Because you want to. But let's say that you saw another girl and she was attractive and you would want to go and talk, but you're busy doing something else. You don't feel the need to just like stop what you're doing and to go over there because you're going to miss the opportunity, or you're going to be a coward if you don't do it, right? You just are going to operate in your life just normally, like making the choices that you want and not making the choices that you don't want, right? Unfortunately, that's not an easy state to be, right? Most of the time, if you look at your own behavior, you'll find that you're either being driven by an inhibition, right? Or you're being driven by some compulsion to do something, right? And most of our behaviors fall into that category, right? We could look at this in terms of addiction, right? If someone's addicted to something, what does it mean? They're not doing things because they want to do them. They're doing them out of compulsion. They feel like they need the thing, right? Or it's not in their mind what they actually want to do, right? If they were to logically make free will choices of how they would like to spend their day or what they would like to do, it would not be that thing, right? It's a compulsion that is driving them to that thing. And so the idea is to supersede these things, to rise above these things, to transcend these things in order to get to a point where you can truly be free. Now, how do you actually do this? How do you actually graduate from these levels? Well, the first level of freedom, you're already in by default, right? You have inhibition. It prevents you from doing things. Now, like I said, a lot of people might try to use alcohol or something else, they call it liquid courage for a reason, in order to get past that level 1 of inhibition. But what ends up happening is, like I said, it retards your development to level 2 because now you're using a crutch, right? So instead of using a crutch, what you have to do to break through to level 2 is you have to quiet your mind and just force yourself to do action. All right. You have to really just, and this is kind of the hardest thing, right? Because there's no one that can help you with this. It's never going to become easy to do this, but it's just a sheer force of will. You just have to break through and say, I'm going to do this. Damn the consequences. Who cares what happens? Who cares if I get rejected? Who cares if it's embarrassing? It doesn't matter. I'm going to do this thing because I seek to be more free. Right? So that's how you graduate to that level 2. There's just no other way to do that besides just going out and doing it. And I think one of the things that I find useful for helping to break out of that, or helping people to break out of that, is this idea that first of all, no matter what happens, you're going to be okay, which again, that's the confidence, the definition of confidence. If you saw my video on confidence, I talked about that true confidence is knowing the possible outcomes of the situation and knowing that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. Okay. So the idea is that you have this realization that as long as you move outside of your comfort zone, you will grow. Right. And so you have to realize that even if you don't like this thing, even if you feel embarrassed or shy about this thing, the fact that you're doing something that makes you uncomfortable is an act of growth itself. And the more that you do that, the more that you will grow as a person. So that motivation to grow can override that inhibition that's preventing you from doing the thing. And that's where you kind of graduate to level 2. Now, once you hit level 2, a lot of people party and they're like, this is awesome. It's great. They think they're on top of the world. And it feels like that when you hit level 2. But then you start to realize that you're in this compulsion sort of driven place where you're doing things now, you're able to do the things that you couldn't do before, which is great, but now you feel like you have to do them. Now you're not really making a rational decision about it. You're just like, okay, well, I have to do this thing because I have to prove this thing because this is who I am now. Now, to graduate from level 2 to level 3, what has to happen is that there has to have a confidence that is built, right? So the reason why you are in level 1 is because you completely lack any kind of confidence at all. As you get to level 2, you start to build some confidence, right? Because you're building some competence, because you know that you can do this thing, you've done it before, and now you feel like you have to keep on doing that, right? But in order to graduate from level 2 to level 3, you have to develop a true confidence in that area where, again, you know the possible outcomes of the situation. You know that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay, all right? And you have to let go of tying this to your identity, right? It's sort of, and a lot of this requires some introspection because you really have to think about your motivations for doing things, right? And you have to say, am I truly, you have to admit to yourself, am I afraid to do this anymore? Right? And if you're still afraid to do it, then you're still going to do it out of compulsion, right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to prove that you're not afraid, right? And so if you can objectively say, I am not afraid to do this anymore. I could do this if I wanted to, right? Again, it sounds like the lie that the guy in level 1 says is that I could do this if I want to, but you have to truly self-examine and truly get to a point where you truly do believe, yeah, if I wanted to do this, I could do this. So then I don't have to do this anymore. Right? And once you kind of get to that place, and then you're able to sometimes do the thing when you actually feel like doing the thing, that's when you've sort of naturally transitioned to level 3, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't fall back from time to time. It is possible to fall back into levels, but the more that you do something in level 2, and the more that when you're doing that thing, you are doing it from a place of if I would say like self-reflection, right? Of self-awareness, right? Where you're like, okay, there's a reason why I'm doing this. Okay. And I'm not doing this because I'm trying to prove that I can do this. I'm doing this because I truly want to. And the more that you latch onto that and you start to, examine that, the more that you're going to be able to graduate to that level 3 and to get to a point where, hey, you do things only because you want to do them, not because you feel compelled to do them, and not because you're afraid of something that, inhibits you from doing those things. So that's it. That's 3 levels of freedom. And like I said, I'll do another video where I talk about kind of just freedom in general and what the things that block you from gaining freedom. See you tomorrow.